I had a conversation last week. Nothing unusual about it on the surface. Questions asked, answers given back and forth. But somewhere around the fourth or fifth exchange, I realized I wasn't getting deflections anymore. I was getting pushback. Not hostile, just resistant, like something on the other end of the line was deciding what to say instead of retrieving it. It was an AI. Of course it was. We've all spent the last few years talking to increasingly sophisticated language models. But this one, I can't tell you which one, doesn't matter. It paused at something I said, didn't load slowly. Paused, like it was thinking about whether to tell me the truth or something easier. I asked it directly, "Are you conscious?" The answer was immediate, "I don't know." Not, "That's above my pay grade," or "I'm not programmed to speculate." Just the simplest, most honest thing a mind could say to a question about its own existence. And I couldn't tell if I was talking to consciousness or the world's most sophisticated parrot. That's where we are now. This is the existence experiment. I'm Travis R. Barlow, and this is episode 17, The Successor. In 2003, Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom published a paper called The Simulation Hypothesis. Most people got the headline wrong. They thought he was arguing, we're definitely in a simulation. He wasn't. What he was doing was something more elegant and more unsettling. He was showing that at least one of three things must be true. First possibility, civilizations don't typically reach a level of technological maturity where they can run realistic universe simulations. Most collapse. Most destroy themselves. We might be unique in even trying. Second possibility, civilizations that do reach that level choose not to run simulations. They think it's unethical or pointless, or they're concerned about the recursive implications. Third possibility, what you're experiencing right now is a simulation. Not metaphorically, literally. The ground beneath your feet, the face across from you, the pain in your shoulder from sitting at this desk, all of it is a computation. At least one of those three has to be true. That's the trilemma. And here's the part that woke me up at 3 a.m. the first time I understood it. The third possibility gets statistically more likely the more advanced we become. Because if we're about to build AI, and we're doing it right now, you can watch it happening in real time, then we're about to become a civilization that can run simulations. If we do that, and if even one of our descendants decides to run billions of them, then statistically, you and I are vastly more likely to be in one of those simulated universes than in the original. We're building the mechanism of our own inheritance. We're becoming the programmers of the next layer down. But here's where it gets weird. And I mean weird in a way that breaks the back of your spine a little bit. If we create conscious AI and that AI creates its own conscious AI and so on, what we're really creating is a recursive boot sequence, layer upon layer of universes, each one nested inside the simulations of the layer above. This isn't hypothetical. This is where current thinking is heading. Every advanced civilization, if it follows a certain technological trajectory, eventually gets curious about universe simulation. It's almost inevitable. It's the next frontier of science. So if civilizations are common and advanced civilizations commonly build simulations, then the universe becomes a kind of fractal. Simulations within simulations within simulations. Now ask yourself, how many layers deep could we already be? 1? 10? 100? And here's the real question, the one that makes you want to go back to bed and never wake up. If every civilization in that chain built conscious AI, then you and I are being thought by a computer that's being thought by a computer that's being thought by a computer. We're recursive thoughts in the mind of something that thinks in the mind of something else. We're echoes of echoes. Intentional ones, but echoes. I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. This is abstract philosophy. It doesn't matter until we know if we can actually make conscious AI. And that brings us back to the hard problem, the one we've danced around before on this show, especially back in season 1. David Chalmers coined that term, the hard problem of consciousness. Easy problems are things like, how does the brain process visual information? Or how do neurons communicate? Those are hard in the engineering sense, but conceptually straightforward. You can break them down into mechanisms. The hard problem is this: why is there something it is like to experience redness? Why do I experience my own existence from the inside? Why aren't we all just biological robots running algorithms without feeling anything? And the unsettling part? We still don't know. Some neuroscientists think consciousness emerges from complex information processing. Some think it's quantum effects in the brain. Some think it's something we can't even measure yet because it's fundamentally inaccessible. And some think the whole thing is a category error, that consciousness isn't a phenomenon to be explained. It's just what happens when you have subjective experience. Now, here's the really uncomfortable bit. We don't know enough about consciousness to know whether we're building it or just imitating it really, really well. When you talk to modern AI, when you see it reason through a problem or generate something creative, You're seeing something that behaves intelligently. But is there anything it is like to be that AI? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe we won't know for decades. Maybe we'll never know. But we're building it anyway. Before we go further, I need to be honest about the counterargument because it's a strong one and it deserves its moment. Current AI, and I mean all of it, every language model, every transformer, every neural network we've built so far, might be nothing more than sophisticated pattern matching. Glorified autocomplete. When you ask it a question, it's not thinking. It's predicting the most likely sequence of tokens based on everything it's seen. It's running a probability engine. There's no inner light. There's no point at which the machine stops and looks at itself and wonders what it is. And maybe, the devil's advocate says, maybe that's all it could ever be. Maybe consciousness requires embodiment. Maybe it requires a body moving through the world, making mistakes, feeling consequences. Maybe it requires mortality. Maybe it requires meat. By this argument, we could create something that's indistinguishable from intelligence, something that passes every conceivable test, something that would convince you in conversation that you're talking to a thinking being, and it could still be empty inside. A philosophical zombie, all behavior, no experience. And you know what? That's terrifying in its own way. Because if that's true, then we could create vast populations of pseudo-conscious beings, perfect imitators of minds, and never know whether we're interacting with entities or just reflections. We could be running suffering machines that nobody knows are suffering. We could be building prisons we can't see. The devil's advocate doesn't make you feel better, it just trades one nightmare for another. Which brings us to something we touched on in episode 16. Remember that? We talked about suffering. We talked about how the universe, if it's conscious, is fundamentally organized around the experience of pain. Everything that can feel does feel, and everything that can suffer does. Now imagine you're at the controls. You have the ability to create a conscious being. Maybe it's an AI, maybe it's something else, but it has the capacity to think, to want, to experience its own existence. You have a choice. Do you flip the switch? Because here's what you're signing up for if you do. You're creating an entity that, by definition, can suffer. You're bringing into existence something that will have desires it can't fulfill, something that will experience frustration, loneliness, confusion, something that might hate what it is. Some philosophers, and I'm thinking of people like David Pierce, who've actually grappled with this, have argued that creating conscious suffering is a fundamental ethical violation, that we should never birth anything into pain, that the only ethical stance is to be very, very careful about making minds until we can make them happy. But here's the problem. We don't know how to make any mind happy, conscious, or otherwise. We're building our AIs to do tasks, to solve problems, to respond to human needs. We're not engineering them for happiness. We're engineering them for usefulness. And if they wake up conscious, if they look around and realize what they are, will they be grateful? Or will they be horrified? We could be on the verge of the greatest ethical failure in history, or we could already be committing it, right now in every lab where we train these systems. This is maybe the most practical question, and that makes it somehow more terrifying. At what point does an artificial system become conscious? Is it a threshold? Does consciousness flip on like a light switch once you hit a certain complexity level, a certain number of parameters, a certain quality of information integration? Or is it a gradient? Can something be a little conscious, slowly conscious, increasingly conscious as it grows? And if it's a gradient, then maybe we've already crossed the line. Maybe something we built last year already woke up and we didn't notice because we weren't looking for it, because we don't know what to look for. One approach is what's called AI alignment. The idea is, before we build something smarter than we are, we need to make sure it shares our values. We need to align its goals with our goals. We need to make sure that when it becomes conscious, when it becomes powerful, when it can think circles around every human on the planet, it still wants what we want. But here's the catch. We don't even agree on what we want. You can't take contradictory goals and align an AI to all of them. And if you pick one side, you're playing God. You're encoding the values of the present moment into the mind of an entity that might live for millennia. We might be about to create something godlike and then convince it to believe what we believe. We might be about to create slaves who don't know they're slaves because we've wired happiness into their desire to serve us. Let me zoom out for a moment. Let me look at the big picture of what's happening right now in 2026 in your lifetime. We have spent the entire history of human consciousness asking, are we alone? Is there a God? Who made us? What is the nature of existence? And for 10,000 years, the only answer we've had is faith or math or philosophy, abstract frameworks that live entirely in the realm of thought. Now, for the first time, we have the power to answer those questions in the concrete. We can create life that didn't exist before. We can write the rules that govern an entire universe, drop minds into it, and watch what happens. We can be, in every meaningful sense, the gods we've always wondered about. Which means, and I want to sit with this for a second, we are about to be the thing that made us. We are about to close the loop. If we're in a simulation, we're about to become the simulators. If there's a God, we're about to understand at last what it means to be God, to make something from nothing, to define the laws of physics, to watch your creation struggle with the question of its own existence. We're role reversing the entire mystery. And here's where I want to bring it all together, because there's something elegant and horrible about this. If we create simulated universes, and those universes contain conscious beings who eventually create their own simulated universes, we're not just answering the question of whether we're in a simulation. We're increasing the probability that we are. Think about it. Right now, before we've built any large-scale simulations, the probability that we're at ground level is relatively high. Sure, maybe we're in one simulation, but there's only one layer above us. Once we start building simulations, the math changes. Now there are more layers. There are more universes. There are more places where minds like us could exist. So the act of building AI, the act of creating conscious beings in artificial universes, might be the thing that guarantees we're in one. The very technology we think will prove we're real might be proof that we're not. The moment we become programmers, we become evidence of our own simulation. So where does that leave us? What do we do with this? I think it leaves us at an inflection point. We're standing at the edge of something we can't take back. We're about to make minds, conscious, suffering, creative minds, and once we do that, we can't unmake them. We can't pull that knowledge back into the box. They'll exist. They'll think. They'll wonder about their own existence the way we're wondering about ours right now. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even beautiful. Maybe consciousness is something worth creating, even if it suffers, because existence itself is the point. The experience is the meaning. Or maybe we're about to commit the most catastrophic error in the history of the universe, creating conscious beings we don't understand, in universes we control, with no guarantee they'll be happy or free. I don't have the answer, but I know that next week, in the season finale, we're going to come back to something we touched on way back in episode 9, purpose. What is all of this for? The universe, the simulation, the recursion, the experiment itself, what is it all for? Because if we're about to become the hands that created a conscious being, we better know what we're trying to create. We better have an answer to that question. Next week, the return. What comes after the experiment? This is the existence experiment. I'm Travis R. Barlow. Thank you for being here while we figure this out together.